Hi, I'm Lowell Joseph Gallin, and I am here at the Costa Rican Embassy to Israel in Ramat with Ambassador Rodrigo Carreras. Ambassador Carreras, thank you for being
nice to see you,
a guest on my show. This is a very happy reunion for me because we haven't seen each other in quite a long time. And
over 12 years.
12 years?
Yeah.
That's a long time by my count too. I didn't know it was that long, so not a moment too soon. And we're going to be talking about Costa Rica. And the first question I wanted to ask you, going to the film world, is Jurassic Park. I assume you all saw Jurassic Park, and that you know it is now possible, or very shortly will be possible, to, with mitochondrial DNA, to resurrect dead dinosaurs. That takes place in the story in Costa Rica. Behind us we have a map of Costa Rica. And I wanted to ask Ambassador Carreras, could you tell us a little bit about the island where the story takes place? Does it exist, or is it a fantasy island?
I believe Michael Crichton, when he invented the island and the story, he probably had in mind an island that belongs to Costa Rica, which is the Cocos Island.
Here we are.
Which is approximately 300 miles to the south of this point of Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua to the north in Central America, and the island would be...
Cocos Island.
The Michael Crichton's...
Yeah, and well, that's... I think he must have had that island.
But it would be a few hundred miles to the...
300 miles to the south of this point here.
Okay, it was south of Costa Rica in the Pacific Ocean.
Actually, it is an island which is very interesting for our point of view, and it is that the island produces for Costa Rica. Costa Rica has a small territory. We are 50,000, 900,000 kilometers, square kilometers size. But when you take into consideration that little island, which is, it produces around it
the real island, not Cocos Island.
The real island, Cocos Island. Cocos Island.
The one that it's based on.
The one that exists. It produces around it economic zone, an exclusive economic zone of 200 miles around in radius. And this makes it that the territory of Costa Rica in the sea is actually 11 times the size of the territory in land. And I'm certain that was
territorial waters.
It is. Yes, it is. Not actually territorial, but economic exclusive zone, according to the International Convention of the Sea.
And this island, the real one, is called
Cocos Island.
And in the story, it has a different name.
I don't recall right now.
Okay.
But yes.
Note about Dr. Michael Crichton. He died a few years ago of cancer, I think. He was a graduate of the Harvard Medical School, and his primary practice was writing medical thrillers like The Andromeda Strain. In the same way with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle from Scotland, he did practice as a doctor, but he got so interested in writing stories and made so much money on the stories that he moved from being a doctor in a country practice to being a full-time author. But his stories are based on real experiences he had, especially at the hospital in Edinburgh. So that was Michael Crichton. In a few years, you want to pay attention because you might see little baby dinosaurs running around outside your house. The technology certainly exists for cloning. Dolly the sheep was cloned in 1996. That's almost 20 years ago. The technology now exists for cloning all sorts of creatures, including, I understand, us. Whether this has been done or not, I don't know. So maybe one day there will be a real Jurassic Park in Costa Rica, or maybe right here in Israel. So let's go to another issue. Ambassador Carreras, your country is very unusual in that many people apparently have possible Jewish origin from the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal. Could you tell us about the traditions and how that's known, the surnames? How is it known that this is the case, assuming it is the case?
Yes, there is an essay written by a person very interested in genealogy and in history in Costa Rica in the 1950s, Professor Blanco. He wrote a treatise in which he stated that over 80% of the Costa Rican surnames are of Marrano origin. When I say Marrano origin, Jews who had converted to Catholicism in order not to be expelled from Spain. This term came to them because they would eat pig in public in order to show the rest of the Spaniards that they had actually converted.
Meaning the word Marrano means pig?
Yes.
In current Spanish or older Spanish?
In current Spanish.
Okay.
And it is something which is very interesting because actually it was not the Spaniards who called them that, but it was the Jewish people who refused to convert. They would call them that way, not the spy way. But these people, actually many of them immigrated, and when Costa Rica was discovered and conquered, it was actually the last country in the Spanish Empire to be conquered.
When was that?
Oh, we're talking about the 1700 something.
At that late,
yes,
because
yes.
the expulsion was in 1492.
Yes.
And from Portugal in 1505.
Yes, but given this condition, in Costa Rica, it was the remotest and poorest province of the Spanish Empire, and so things would not work in Costa Rica. Government did not work, and most important than that, the Inquisition did not work. The power of the king did not get to Costa Rica. So it was a very free place, and people who came to Costa Rica were established a very type of person, which is people who do not like to be subjected, that do not like to be governed. And so this is something that brought in a lot of Marrano Jews who came to Costa Rica because in Costa Rica they could go on practicing their Judaism, which was condemned by the Inquisition as judaizante, in which it was a practice where they would in private go on practicing Judaism. So in Costa Rica they would. And in fact there is a town in Costa Rica, actually a city today of a very important city, which is called Escazú, where tradition says it is the town of the witches, of witchcraft. And that is because they would see the ladies in many of the houses on Fridays with veils, enchanting candles, without any saints to pray to. So they said it was witchcraft. And we know, of course, what it was.
So the city of the witches was the city of Jewish ladies saying the prayers over Friday night Shabbat candles.
Yes, yes. And that way, most Costa Ricans are not aware of it, but most of our surnames are of Marrano origin.
So 80% is a tremendous number. If that's correct, that would mean 4/5 of the population is of Jewish ancestry to some extent.
Yes, yes. Now, but we must also have a specialist from the Toledano Institute in Jerusalem explained to me the other day that lists of last names, lists of surnames, you always have to have a certain doubt. Because in Latin America, for instance, Indians who were owned by encomenderos of the Spaniards that were control over them would sometimes take the surnames of their owners.
What's an encomendero?
The encomienda was a system that existed during the conquest and colony, where the Spaniards would receive control over an important group of Indians in order to teach them the true faith of Catholicism, and in exchange for them that get their free labor, a form of slavery.
That's one form of a good deal, I suppose, as it was presented. Let's add a note about the Inquisition. The Inquisition of the Catholic Church that Ambassador Carreras mentioned, most people know it as something directed against Jews. The Inquisition was primarily directed against heretics, or what the Catholic Church defined as heretics, and women as witches. These were the ones who were the subject of extermination, torture and extermination for centuries, long before the Catholic Church in Spain got interested in Jews. And then it was only after the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, Jews who had converted to Catholicism, the Church wanted to make sure they were real converts and not practicing Judaism in secret. Those were the targets of the Inquisition, not Jews themselves. Spain was supposed to be Judenrein, free of Jews, and all of its colonies. So what Ambassador Carreras is saying is that as a kind of Wild West frontier of the Spanish Empire, Costa Rica was so far from centralized Spanish Catholic administration that many Jews who had converted to Catholicism but secretly continued to practice Judaism went there because they were beyond the long arm of the law of the office of whatever it's called. It has a neutral name, the Inquisition, the office for the Congregation of the Faith.
Yeah.
In fact, the former Pope was head of that.
The former Pope had been head of that office.
So this is what Ambassador Carreras means. The Jews went there, and other people who liked the frontier life. It sounds like a kind of place for Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett of the Spanish-speaking world. So you have a lot of Jews there, but as he said, you cannot necessarily tell by the surnames. Let me ask you about your father, Reverend Dr. Nunez. He was one of the revolutionaries who founded your country in 1948. Could you say something about that unusual year where 3 countries came into being? India, Israel, and Costa Rica.
And Pakistan too.
I didn't know that. Pakistan.
Yes. In fact, that was the thing, was how to divide the Iraq into a place for the Indians and a place for the Hindu people and a place for the Muslim of India. And yes, it was a very important year, because in that year in Costa Rica we had a civil war, a very, very bloody civil war. If you take into account that it was a civil war that took in time less than 1 month.
1 month?
Yes, less
That's
than 1
month. That's a short war.
And in that time, however, there were 3,500 people who died on both sides.
7,000 total.
No, 3,500
total.
3,500 people
in 1 month.
In less than 1 month.
That's a lot of people.
And we were talking, at that time the population of Costa Rica was 750,000 in total.
That's a lot of people.
Then we're talking about 0.5% of the population died in that less than a month of fighting. So it was a very bloody civil war. But after the civil war, Don Pepe Figueres, they did something very unusual.
Could you say who Don Pepe was?
Don Pepe Figueres was, we consider him like in Israel, the Ben Gurion of Costa Rica. He was the person who revolutionized Costa Rica, who brought in a new Costa Rica, nationalized banking, and he did exactly what I'm going to say, which is that despite he was a man who came at the head of a liberation army into the capital, one of his first acts in government was on December 1st, 1948. He abolished Costa Rican armed forces, and he went to a total unilateral disarmament, and that way Costa Rica became the first country, and we can say the one that for 65 years now has existed as a country without an army.
This is unprecedented in world history. Is there any other example since, well, written history as we know it goes back to the ancient Sumerians 5,000 years ago? That's ground zero. There are no known written records from any other civilization before that. The Indus Valley civilization in India, the Chinese, the Egyptians are all later. Ground zero for humanity as we know it is in southern Mesopotamia, Iraq today, the Sumerian civilization. Is there any other record of any country in the world disarming its own army unilaterally,
yes,
as opposed to being losing in a war?
After this, President Arias started a policy of making this something very recently that we could do in other places. And he was successful in doing it in Panama and also in Haiti.
They also disbanded the
Panama
armies?
is a successful case.
Amazing.
Haiti is one that is right now trying to revise the position and which is really not working very well for many complex reasons. Besides that, there are a lot of microstates, several microstates in the Pacific and other places that don't have an army, but they don't have believable threat against them, and that really are too small. Countries with small populations that really they don't have an army, they have a police, constabulary, or whatever. And in Costa Rica, we have had a police force during these years. Now, this is very important because it's something that we did in Costa Rica, in Central America, which is a region of the world with a lot of problems. You will remember the crisis of Central America. You will remember we were on the verge of a generalized war in Central America. And Costa Rica maintained that position. And if we look at the thought, political thought, and we look at peace-mongering people such as Kant. When you see Immanuel Kant, he never dreamt about a country without an army. He talks about having small, non-professional armies, but without an army he doesn't think about it. But Don Pepe Figueres did. Don Pepe is supposed to have come to this conclusion after reading H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, there is one of the stories of the times he visited, where he visits a society in the future where armies have been abolished and war has been abolished, and that inspired in him the idea of doing in Costa Rica. But when he did it, mind you, he knew that 2 weeks after that, we were going to be invaded by a neighboring country.
Did it happen?
Yes, we were invaded.
So what did you do if you have no army?
Well, we had abolished the army, but there was still mobilization after the Civil War. And what we did was what Don Pepe thought all about, that Costa Rica went to international support, and we went to the Organization of American States. We were the first country to invoke the Rio Treaty.
What's the Rio Treaty?
The Rio Treaty is a mutual security, a collective security agreement in the Organization of American States, which was made in Rio de Janeiro. That's why it's called the Rio Treaty, and it was designed that if any Latin American country was invaded by a foreign army, especially thinking in Germany and later thinking in the Soviet Union, the rest of the countries of the continent would come to its defense. If a country was attacked by another Latin American countries, then the others would go and help the one that was being attacked.
So your father was one of the founders of your country with Don Pepe.
Of this Second Republic, we call it. He was actually the ideologue of the National Liberation Party, which was a party that emerged after the revolution. And he was the one who wrote the basis of the party, the ideological basis, and all his life he went on being the ideologue of the party.
And your father was also an ordained Catholic priest.
He was an ordained Catholic priest. He died as an ordained Catholic priest, and he loved his his priesthood as much as he loved Israel and he loved Costa Rica.
And he was ambassador of Costa Rica to the United Nations?
Yes, he was ambassador of Costa Rica to the United Nations. He was ambassador of Costa Rica to Israel 2 times.
But he didn't get punched in the face here like he got punched in the face in the General Assembly once, I remember.
Well, in the General Assembly...
Could you tell that story?
Yes, I'll be delighted. Well,
very few ambassadors get punched in the face in the General Assembly, and Ambassador Carreras' father, who was an ordained Catholic priest, had that privilege. He's going to tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, actually, Father Benjamin Nunez, he did many things, and among the things that he did, one of them was the pacification of Costa Rica that ended the Civil War, but that's a totally a different story. But in Israel, he was known basically for working very hard to end the persecution or against the persecution of Jews in the Soviet Union. And he also worked very hard against that infamous resolution that declared Zionism as a form of racism. But among this, when the resolution of Zionism as a form of racism was being
when was
approved,
that?
I don't remember the year
it was
right now.
It was revoked in 1975
yes, but
and passed after the Yom Kippur War of 1973, I think.
Yes.
Those days.
And then in the General Assembly there were only 3 ambassadors who spoke against the resolution.
Only 3?
Only 3. The rest kept quiet.
Who were the other 2?
One was President Herzl, who was ambassador of Israel to the United Nations. And 2, there was Pat Moynihan of the United States. And the 3rd was Father Benjamin Nunez. After Father Benjamin Nunez ended his speech, it is traditional in the General Assembly that people go up to the one who and speaking, say hello, to greet him, and say we had an Egyptian diplomat. I'll reserve his name. I know him very well.
Okay.
And he came up to my father and punched him in the General Assembly hall.
Now, if you or I did that, we'd get arrested. But you know, you have diplomatic immunity, so one ambassador punches the other, nothing happens to you. What happened to your father? Did he lose the eye? Or
No.
Did he punch him back?
No, he could have, but he controlled himself.
I could learn from that.
Yes.
I'm very hot-blooded.
As a Catholic priest, he knows how to put the other cheek.
That was a good quality to have.
Yeah.
And so I say he got punched in the face by the Egyptian. Did he ever say sorry to him?
No, but with the years, I visited Egypt when I was Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he was very kind to me, knowing about who I was.
Well, that's from my experience, my personal experience, especially my recent personal experience. It's very hard for individuals or institutions to say sorry. They just do or don't do things. And what you're describing about this Egyptian ambassador who did say sorry,
he was a diplomat.
A diplomat. At least he was nice to you. Well, at least he didn't punch you in the face.
No, he actually gave me a Mont Blanc pen.
Oh, that's
which
nice.
I always carry with me. And one of the reasons I carry around with me is that if you look at the Mont Blanc pen from the top, it's a Star of David. And
he gave that to you?
Yeah, and
I don't think that was intentional.
Well, Arabs love it, but they don't know it's a Star of David that they carry next to their hearts.
Just as well. See, there you have it. Israel was being declared persona non grata by the entire international community in 1973 after the Yom Kippur War, or people could call it the October War. And 3 ambassadors of 3 nations stood up to defend Israel. The United States, Israel, that's logical, you defend yourself, and Costa Rica. One of them had the zechut, the merit, to be so enraged, another ambassador got punched in the face. And that was Ambassador Carreras' father, who, as we mentioned before, lived and died as an ordained Catholic priest.
I must say, Mr. Ehud Olmert, when he was mayor of of Jerusalem, and I was ambassador here the first time. This is my second time as ambassador here, as you know well know. Right. We went, you were there.
I was, right,
yeah,
yes,
you
that's
went
right.
to Jerusalem to inaugurate a small street with the name of
right.
my father.
Yes, in Gilo.
No, it's not in Gilo, it's in
near Gilo.
Over near Holy Land.
He's bringing back old memories.
Yes.
Now I do remember that,
yes.
And until this, he's mentioning this now, we haven't seen each other for 12 years, I haven't remembered that at all.
Yes.
But it's true, I can confirm it happened, I was there.
It's a small, one block and a half, and but it's there. I go to see it from time to time.
It's still there.
When I have friends visiting, I take them there. But when I remember when Mayor Olmert was
yes.
talking about me, then he told me, I'm looking for a street to put your father's name on it. I just stared at him and said, Mayor Olmert, you know the King George? Change the name.
Did he do it?
No, not yet.
So we have a King George Street, and we have an ambassador, Benjamin
Nunes. Comer Benjamin Nunes is the name of the street.
Comer means priest in Hebrew. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude this first interview, Ambassador Carreras?
Well, to tell you that for Costa Rica, the relationship with Israel is of great importance. And we see Israel as something more in the world. Usually when you see Israel, you think about Israel as a zone of conflict, of a zone of war. But we know that Israel has a lot more meaning. It has the meaning of spirituality. It has the meaning of being able to meet interesting people every day. But above that, the capacity of being a country that produces richness, that produces science, that produces technology, and that it gives to the world not only its spiritual light, but also its technological and scientific light.
As it says in Isaiah chapter 2, from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, which includes, as Ambassador Carreras said, scientific discovery and technological development, invention, and creativity in so many areas. So Ambassador Carreras, thank you very much for this first interview, and looking forward to the next one.
So
and we thank our viewers for watching and listening.